You do not choose your thoughts. They happen to you. That sentence sounds wrong. It feels wrong. Every instinct you have pushes back against it. But the science, the actual peer-reviewed, repeated science, says otherwise. And once you understand what the evidence shows, you will never look at your own decisions the same way again. In 1983, a neuroscientist named Benjamin Libet attached electrodes to the scalps of human volunteers. He asked them to do something simple, flex their wrist, whenever they wanted. No countdown, no signal. Just whenever the urge struck them. He told each participant to watch a fast-moving dot on a clock face and remember exactly where the dot was the moment they first felt the desire to move. What he found should have ended 1,000 philosophical debates. It didn't, because what it showed was too disturbing to fully accept. The brain began preparing the movement, measurably, electrically, about 550 milliseconds before the participant moved. That part was expected. But the moment the participants reported feeling the conscious urge to act, that came 200 milliseconds before the movement, which means the brain had already started the process 350 milliseconds before the person was even aware they had decided anything. Your brain made the choice. Then it told you about it. You felt like you decided. You were the last to know. Libet called this preparatory signal the readiness potential. Some dismissed it, some called it a measurement error, but the experiment has been replicated, refined, extended. In 2008, John Dylan Haynes at the Bernstein Center for Computational Neuroscience in Berlin pushed it further. Using fMRI scanners capable of watching the whole brain in real time, Haynes asked participants to press a button with either their left or right hand whenever they chose, and to report when the decision felt conscious. He could predict which hand they would choose, with startling accuracy, up to 10 seconds before they reported making the decision. 10 seconds. The brain had committed. The person had no idea. You are not reading this and choosing how to feel about it. A cascade of electrochemical signals is processing this information, and your conscious mind is receiving a report. The implications do not stop at philosophy. They reach into courtrooms, into classrooms, into every conversation you have ever had about willpower, discipline, or moral failure. If the conscious self arrives late to every decision, what does it mean to hold someone responsible? What does it mean to praise someone for self-control? Psychologist Daniel Wegner spent years examining what he called the illusion of conscious will. In his 2002 book, he documented case after case in which the human mind constructs the sensation of having caused something, even when it demonstrably did not. People feel authorship over actions they could not have controlled. They feel no authorship over actions they absolutely caused. The feeling of deciding, Wegner argued, is a narrative the brain produces after the fact, not a window into your choices, a story told about them. This is not a fringe view. It aligns with decades of social psychology research on confabulation, the brain's tendency to invent plausible explanations for things it does not actually understand about itself. Split-brain patients, studied extensively by Nobel laureate Roger Sperry and his colleague Michael Gazzaniga, would perform actions controlled by one hemisphere of the brain and then have the other hemisphere instantly fabricate a convincing reason for why they did it. They believed their explanation. It was completely made up. Your brain does the same thing every day. But here is where the story turns, and this is the part that almost no one sits with long enough. If you do not consciously initiate your choices, what exactly are you? Libet himself never concluded that free will was dead. He pointed to something else in the data, something subtle that most people skip past. There was a window, a narrow gap between the moment the unconscious brain started preparing the action and the moment the action actually executed. During that window, something could intervene. Something could stop it. He called it the veto. The conscious mind, Libet argued, may not fire the gun, but it holds the power to abort the shot. You are not the author of your impulses, but you may be the editor. Think about what that means in practice. Every craving that has ever pulled at you, every flash of anger, every moment you reached for something you later regretted. Those impulses were not you deciding. They were signals rising from depths your conscious mind cannot see. But the pause, the half-second gap between impulse and action, that pause is real. That pause is yours. Neuroscientist and author Sam Harris describes this as liberation rather than despair. Once you stop believing that your thoughts are you become free to observe them instead of obeying them. The thought appears. You notice the thought. You are not obligated to follow it. This is not a metaphor. It is what the data shows, and it changes the question. The question is no longer whether you control your mind. The science says you do not in the way you imagined. The question is whether you can learn to use the one window that actually exists, the veto. the pause, the moment between the signal and the act. That window is small, smaller than you think. But every tradition that has ever taught human beings how to be better, every philosophy, every discipline, every practice that works, has pointed at exactly that window without always knowing what it was. The Stoics called it the space between stimulus and response. Mindfulness teachers call it the gap. Cognitive behavioral therapists call it the moment of choice. They were all describing the same thing, the same biological window that Benjamin Libet accidentally discovered with electrodes and a fast-moving dot on a clock face. You do not choose your thoughts, but inside the machinery that generates them, there is a narrow, real, and actionable gap. The question now is whether you ever learn to find it. And if you are sitting with that question, if something in you is already pushing back, already rehearsing why you are different, why your choices really are yours, know this: that reaction also began before you were aware of it. The readiness potential fired, the cascade started, and then, a fraction of a second later, you felt like you decided to disagree. That feeling is the most human thing about you. It is also, the science suggests, the last thing to arrive.